Let's make it center or center it. So inside of our column here, I'm going to say main axis. I'm going to say center because I want this to be in the middle. Save that. You can see the image is the center there. Because we talk about column, the center is going to be vertical. That's why we're going to see this vertically centered. Okay, not horizontally. Not a problem. If we wanted, we can actually add this, add a padding or center the actual widget. And the other way you can do actually to invoke all these other options, very simply, you can just go ahead and click on the image and you can say on Mac option enter, and you have that option as well. Okay, you can see at the bottom there for Windows Alt enter. So I want center it like this, and you can see now it's in the middle. Okay, there's different ways you can do this. Very good. So we have our image here. Now, if I want this to be to the top, I can just put a spacer. Let's see, we got a center here. I can just put a simple spacer like this. It should pull the image up top. So let's add a container. So I'm going to give it a height of about 120. And for the child, let's go ahead and give a text. So for now, I'm going to say our question like that. So question. Okay, save that. You can see we have our container there. The idea here, the text is the question. So we're going to pull this data from a local list, which we're going to add in a second here. In fact, let's go ahead and do right now. For now, I'm just going to create a list. Call this question bank, if you will. It's an array. And I'm going to just put one real quick here. So I have it. I'm going to copy it just one real quick so you can see. And I have it there. Very good. So we have our question bank, which we will make it a little bit more better in a second here, but I just want to show you real quick. So this is a list or an array. We are going to try to access this. So to access that, of course, it's very easy. There's a few ways to do so. So I'm going to invoke the question, of course, question bank. Now, because it's a list, I can go dot like this, and there's a lot of methods. So list is an object, so it has a lot of methods. We can use insert to add things to it, or we can go ahead and say replace, get range, and so many other things we can do here, right? And the other way we can also say element at, right? If we say element at, we can pass the index which we want to retrieve. So as you know, arrays or lists, they start at 0 in most programming language. So if I say 0 like that, if I save, you notice now I have the US Declaration of Independence, which is the text that we have in our array here. So if I had another one, let's just copy this, make it different like that. If I save and change this to 1, obviously we are going to be able to get the second one. The problem here is very interesting because it's saying that the index range we have issues. The reason why is because we change our data source and the hot reload doesn't quite pick up that. So we usually have to rerun real quick. It doesn't take that much anyway. And then you can see it's going to show you our second text. Very good, that's working great, but there's also another simple way to do this, which is to add our square brackets there and pass the index 0 if we want the first element and 1 the second and so forth. So if I save now, you're going to see the same thing is going to happen. We are getting the first one. Now the idea is to make this a little bit more dynamic because we want to be able to allow users to choose if that is a correct statement in this case or not, and go to the next question. Now, the better way to do this, of course, for now at least, is to create a data model class. That way it's much easier for us to, for instance, create questions on the fly as objects and attach more properties to that object. For instance, in this case here, we can attach whether this is true or false. So that way we can then create a little algorithm that when they click, say it's false, and then it's going to check if this is false and then make the right decision. So to simplify our lives, inside of our lib again, I'm going to create a new file or directory. I'm going to let's call this model. And inside there, I'm going to create another file. It's going to be a Kotlin or Dart file, I should say. And I'm going to call this question like that. Okay. So this is going to be a class. I'm going to call this question. Now our question model class is going to model after a question. So a question has the text, the actual question. In this case, also has whether it's true, that question, or that statement, I should say, whether that's true or false. Maybe the name should be statement, but it's okay. It's still a question in a way. Very good. So in this case here, I'm going to create a string. Call this question text. And then I'm going to create a Boolean value, true or false. I'm going to call this is correct, like that. So we're going to go ahead and highlight both of these and Command N. You can see now we have getters and so forth. What do we need? I'm going to just go ahead and say named constructor. Just hit enter and select all of those, right? And say OK. And now we have this question.name, and we are setting up this question to text, and it's correct. Okay. It does this very weird thing. I don't like that. So I'm going to just organize everything like this. And now we're done with our question class. So now we can actually go back to our home. In our question bank, we can just invoke objects of that. So in this case here, I'm going to get rid of all of this. And I'm going to say for the first, I'm going to say question. So let's do option, enter here to import our library, right? Our question.dart, like that. And then that's imported. And now I can go ahead and create the name. The first thing I'm going to pass here is what I had before. So I'm going to create a first question, and if it's correct, I'm going to just go ahead and say it's true, right? So I'm constructing here our object. Okay, so our question object. So we're passing the question and whether it's true or not. So I'm going to do the same thing with others. So because there's a few that I've added, I'm just going to copy and paste. That way you don't have to watch me do all of this. It's quite boring. So the second here, you're going to see everything it's there. All right, as you can see, I've copied and pasted all of the questions, and they all have now the true or false. Now that we have all of our questions, to invoke those questions again, we can't do like this. This will just give us an error. In fact, if I just go ahead and run, because I've changed a few things, we need to run it in its entirety. Notice that we have question is not a subtype of type string. Makes sense because that question is actually contains object. So now I can say question.0, and because it's an object, I can just invoke something like question text, like that, because this is one of the properties, right? Which in this case will have this text. Okay, so if I save now, you're going to see it gets the first question. If I say maybe 5, I hope I have that, and save, you're going to go ahead and get the 6th element in our array or list. Okay, so it's working perfectly. So just like that, we're able to create a bank of questions here, a question bank. But in this case here, we actually created a separate class, and then we invoke it here to set it up with the question and whether it's true or not. So this is our question bank, which we're going to be using to then iterate through and see if the user said yes, it's true or false, and tell them whether they're right or wrong.